You can listen to The Professional Left wherever you get your podcasts, on Netroots Radio, or at our website, proleftpod.com, where you can also contribute to this podcast. There's a PayPal button on our website, or you can mail us a letter and or contribution at P.O. Box 9133, Springfield, Illinois, 62791.
This is the podcast for October 21st, 2022. It's not safe for work.
Recorded live from the Cornfield Resistance, where the bonfire of Richard Uline's money can be seen from space. It's The Professional Left with Driftglass and Blue Gal.
Hi there, and happy birthday to Junior Dude.
Happy birthday, Junior Dude.
He is 24 on the 21st.
Uh-huh.
I don't feel old enough to have a 24-year-old child, but I do.
Well, you have a 24-year-old young adult. So
yes, I do, and he's doing well. So very happy. Both of his sisters will be here this afternoon, Friday afternoon, for
the big party,
cake, whatever we're gonna do.
Right, edibles, a lot of edibles.
It is nice to have. I will say this: it is nice to have as your children get into young adulthood, to be able to delegate party chores.
Yes.
You've got a car. You go pick up the ice cream, you know? But other than that, it's going to be a fun day. And happy birthday.
It will. And
Junior Dude.
I will say I got a weird laughing flashback or sort of just something hit me. I mentioned this to you earlier. Junior Dude is crashing in the basement. Mm-hmm. And he's got a comfortable little nest down there. But there's a flaw in it in that there's a gap in the wall about my head height that separates the rear wall from basically the backyard deck area. It's all sealed. It's all insulated. That's not the problem. The problem is that a certain cat of ours likes to leap up there and go tearing into places.
In the cement that he thinks is great.
It's great. And getting him out is a problem.
Yes.
Getting him out when Junior Dude's trying to sleep is a problem. And being up there and then jumping down on him while he sleeps is a real problem. Oh,
man.
So
we know he's known as the parkour kitty at our house.
Yes. And we've learned that shaking treats and using toys to get him out usually works.
But
the problem is the hole is configured in such a way, flush up against some ductwork and some wood, that the cinder blocks are ever so slightly curved, that sealing it is a real problem. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You just can't duct tape, although we've tried a piece of cardboard or something over it, because that's all it really needs. It's just something to discourage the cats from going up there. Mm-hmm. So yesterday I toddled down there to apply a solution that I think has worked. Mm-hmm. But it occurred to me, I'm going into the basement during the Halloween season down a set of narrow stairs. There's a black cat involved, might be in the hole, might not be. I don't know where it is. To wall up something. I've hit the Edgar Allan Poe trifecta.
You have hit the Edgar Allan Poe trifecta for Halloween. Yes.
There is a story called The Black Cat, which he wrote about a man being discovered for murdering his wife, because when he kills her, I think he takes a swing at her with an axe or the cat or something. There's an axe and a cat in a stairway in a basement involved. He walls her up in his basement and accidentally walls the cat up too. When the cops come to investigate, they hear this, and that is he is therefore discovered. But it's got a little cask of Amontillado or Amontillado, depending on how you pronounce it. It's got some telltale heart going on. I just thought, and I'm an Edgar Allan Poe fan. I'm like, that's really sweet. And then I double checked the hole to make sure the cat was not in there before I seal it up.
You definitely want to find the cat at that point and make sure that they are accounted for.
Anyway,
we also, next Tuesday, will be dropping another episode of No Fair Remembering Stuff, our Tuesday podcast. We're hoping to do that every week in 2023. The subject is the most dangerous person in the media, who you might be able to guess.
Right. And
it is the best episode so far.
Of the two episodes we've done, it's the best so far. Truly.
Because we get to talk about what Driftglass wants to talk about.
Right. Well, sometimes we do. So we will mix it up, I promise.
Yeah, But this was a good one to do, really. Because it was. A lot of it is in your head, and we could talk about it. And it's a long one. We did an hour.
Right. part
And it's
one.
probably part one of two.
Part one is an hour. So
it's an hour. So
yeah, this is
you'll
not
enjoy that. It's a lot. I think it's a very good episode.
Yeah.
We're putting it in the can this weekend, and it'll be dropped on Tuesday. So
and I don't expect things to run an hour anymore.
No,
but
we're learning, aren't we? We're learning how many paper pages turn into 5 minutes of audio.
Right.
And it's a different kind of podcast because it is more scripted than this one.
Yeah, well, it has to be because it really is a single subject from the past that we think needs to be given context, and that's sort of necessary.
We need to research it and have our notes. Yeah,
and we're learning together, which I think is exciting.
Together, very nice, very nice.
Mm-hmm.
There's lots to talk about today. I'm going to start off just by talking about something I found out on Twitter yesterday. Red state murder rates. We have all this talk on Fox and other right-wing outlets about Joe Biden and crime, and they're trying to promote the idea that all of us are going to be murdered in our beds because Joe Biden is president, and Democrats
love crime,
pro-crime. John Fetterman is pro-crime somehow.
Mm-hmm.
But a person on Twitter pointed out that red state murder rates per capita are 40% higher in Trump states than in Biden states, and there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. One is that Republican governors defund police departments.
Yes, they do, through tax cuts.
And, why spend state money on police? And also, of course, the culture of guns.
Uh-huh.
And that led me to mention that nobody talks about red state suicide rates.
No.
The media doesn't talk about that.
No. And I understand why.
I do understand why as well.
Sensitive subject.
Yeah, it is a sensitive subject, and it is something you don't want to encourage. I always, when I mention that S word, mention the suicide prevention hotline. As of this year, they have nationwide made available the number 988, which connects you to the suicide prevention crisis lifeline. And that's terrific that you have a 3-digit number to call everywhere. If you're in emotional distress, if you're having a crisis, it doesn't have to be just ending your life, but people that are in distress, this is a prevention helper. And I strongly encourage you, if you're feeling that your life matters, and call it 988. Somebody who should be calling the suicide hotline for his career is John Durham.
Yeah. Well, in case you don't know who John Durham is, it's kind of important that you understand. You'll see him on television briefly, and he goes away. He's basically Ken Starr with a goatee.
Mm-hmm.
He's the guy that Bill Barr hired on behalf of Donald Trump as a special counsel when Bill Barr was the attorney general. I know it's hard to remember, but that scumbag was once the top cop in the United States, and he did an enormous amount of damage to this country in that position, and only bailed on Trump after there was an armed insurrection. That's when he packed his bag and said, I've had enough, I'm going to head out. Now he's got a book to sell. But John Durham was the goon he hired on Trump's behalf, to conduct a series of witch hunts about all things related to Trump Russia. It's been going on for 3 years now, and the series of witch hunts on which the entire conservative media ecosystem for 3 years, from the Wall Street Journal to Newsmax to Tucker Carlson, have pinned their hopes for revenge and retribution and justice. It's all collapsed. It's all gone to shit. In Alexandria, Virginia this week, federal jury acquitted researcher Igor Dashenko on 4 counts after deliberating for 1 day. U.S. District Judge Anthony Tenga for the Eastern District of Virginia had thrown out one of the 5 counts on which the trial was held last week. There's one gentleman who was convicted, and I think his sentence was suspended for changing the contents of an email.
Yeah, and it was a plea deal that he would have a suspended sentence. Yes, he cooperated.
But this was the thing that was going to blow the lid off of Hillary and Hunter Biden's email or laptop, and the Steele dossier, which was never anything more than raw data and was never treated as anything other than raw data by the FBI, had nothing to do with why the investigation was launched or why it was continued. This was the thing. This was one of those magic bullets that was going to take down the entire Democratic Party. And it came to nothing, as it always does. Now, will this matter to anyone on the right? Of course not, because they're just going to do what they do. They will extend the conspiracy to include John Durham now. Oh, he must have been part of it, or he must have thrown it, or he must have been blackmailed, or blah, blah, blah. Because they are so sure that you and I, Blue Gal, are part of an 81 million person conspiracy to destroy that good Christian man, Donald Trump, that it doesn't matter what the facts show or what people say in court or what you prove or anything. None of it matters. But for us, it's kind of like, well, we fucking told you so. There was nothing here. 3 years later, the hired gun that your thug hired to get Trump off the hook has turned up nothing. So fuck you. Fuck you and everyone that looks like you. And it's been a bad day for Bull Durham in court. And I think this is the last of it. I think this was the last prosecution he was going to file. And it all came to nothing. It was all a complete waste of time and money. Very much like much of the Clinton stuff that the Republicans ran on Bill Clinton, Christmas card lists and Lincoln bedroom. Very much like a lot of the stuff at Benghazi, very much like the stuff they ran on Obama. This is, by the way, if you would like a vision of the future with Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House, this is it. Just one witch hunt bullshit after another. One
for Fox News. And
News.
Probably orchestrated by Fox News producers as well.
Yeah. Fox News producers will do it. Donald Trump will weigh in. Maybe he'll come in by videotape. Jim Jordan will be there just lobbing hand grenades at people. We will be, once again, the embarrassment of the civilized world that we let these lunatics anywhere near the levers of power. And the Fox News viewer and Newsmax viewer will stay home masturbating furiously at the thought of all of this. And it will come to nothing. It'll come to nothing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter. And that was my conclusion was, did Bull Durham, as you call him, fail? No, he didn't fail. He failed in court.
Right.
But, Alex Jones failed in court too. But in the meantime, he made millions.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, Fox News carried their viewers over the transom of pure propaganda.
Mm-hmm.
It was a propaganda mill and a source for them to continually press a button in their viewers' brains. And that's what it was for. And they'll have another one very soon.
And 2 years from now or less, if you mention this fiasco to any conservative, that Durham proved that the Trump
proved
was
everything.
Nothing.
Yeah, it was great.
And then you can haul out of your back pocket that 5 million page volume of all the propaganda that's blown up in their face, and you can relitigate the whole thing, and you can walk them right through it, and they'll go, well, liberals are bad too. And it won't change a thing because these are unrecoverably lost people. They cannot be saved. They cannot be reasoned with. Stop trying to talk to them as you would a normal, sentient, adult human being. It doesn't fucking work.
Well, I want to talk about that for a minute. Because
go ahead.
More and more, I'm really pissed off at how the Republican elite hates their own voters.
Yeah, me too.
It's just a hideous, inhumane thing to do. To continually lie, to continually steal from them, and brainwash them to do your bidding. Right. It's something that we would not allow any company in America, apart from Fox News, to do to someone in the American public. We wouldn't allow it. To sell a product that is fake, that steals money from people, it should be criminal. And we're looking today at Donald Trump's fundraiser for Blake Masters, who, is getting money from Peter Thiel. And the whole system of Republican fundraising is corrupt anyway.
Yeah.
And based on billionaires being able to just toss money into political action committees.
Sure.
But Donald Trump's fundraiser gives 5 cents of every $5, literally 1%, to Blake Masters. And Trump keeps the rest.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's blatant. $4.95 will go to Save America PAC, and 5 cents will go to Blake Masters.
Well,
and what's the purpose of that? The purpose of that is so that that is to pay Donald Trump to stand on a stage with Blake Masters, so that the MAGA will say, "Oh, he's okay." It's horrible.
I agree with you, and by the same token, we get down to the same two possible outcomes that we usually come down to, which is number one. The people we are talking about are adult humans who are responsible for their own actions.
Who can change the channel, I understand.
And they haven't changed the fucking channel in 30 years. And for 30 years, they've been lied to and have looked stupid and been humiliated and had the shit blown up in their face. And all it's done is make them angrier and more committed to their crazy beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
Or the second thing is that they're not sentient adult human beings. They have no agency at all. They really are just reprogrammable meatbags, and they should be treated as such. I mean, they should be cared for. They should not be allowed to vote. They should not be allowed access to public airwaves.
And
because
neither one of us wants a country where either of those things is true.
No, but one of them is true.
Yeah.
One of them has to be true. Either they're adults who are responsible for their own actions, in which case, fuck them. We've been trying for a long time to convince these people who are our neighbors, who go to church with us, who we know, and who all over the country, to just stop for a one fucking minute and look at what you have done. Look at what, and they will not do it.
Right.
And that is like blaming, blaming Ron Rico or Wolf Schmidt for alcoholism. No. Either you stop doing this incredibly destructive thing that you're doing that's freely available, or you're going to kill yourself and lots of other people. But it's on you. It's on you. And the thing that scalds me is that this is from the party of personal responsibility.
Yeah.
This is from the party that glories in being individual and rugged, and everybody's responsible for their actions. Screw welfare. Let's cut Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. The poor did it to themselves. Well, okay, let them hang. Let them all fucking hang by the rope that they knitted for themselves, because and I don't want to do that. I want them all to have health care. I want them all to have clean water, but they don't want that. And I don't know how to stop abusive, obnoxious, racist lunatics from who have taught themselves, with the help of Fox News, with the help of Rupert Murdoch, to refuse to listen to anyone who doesn't tell them anything they want to hear.
Right.
This is what drives me mad about Never Trumpers. Shit, you built this doomsday machine, guys. Why are you yelling at me? I'm the one who told you not to.
Right.
And this is the doomsday machine they built, carrying out its program. And it will either end very badly or sort of badly, but it's not going to end well. And hopefully it ends at the ballot box. That's all I'm praying for at this point.
Yeah. Well, let's get back to the midterms. And my favorite debate performance, and there were some great ones from Democrats this week. Democrats get an A in debate. Congratulations. But Val Demings did just such a fantastic job of reducing, dumb as toast Marco Rubio to the soulless bastard that he is. And she also, I saw a picture today, had a rejoinder to Herschel Walker showing his box of Cracker Jacks badge, claiming, I'm a real policeman. Look at my badge. And rather than laughing at him, she flashed her real police officer badge. This one's real. She not only did she reach into Marco Rubio's chest and yank out his heart during the debate, but she showed her heart.
She did. Absolutely did.
And she speaks for me when she talks about, second graders, fourth graders, high school students, moviegoers, people at a synagogue, and so forth. And Marco Rubio did nothing because $3 million from the NRA. So, and you want to talk about another campaign.
Well, I do want to mention, how badass was Val Demings? So badass that Pam Grier was trending on social media.
Pam Grier was trending, right?
Just saying.
Right.
Just saying. This week, Joe Scarborough continued his campaign to resurrect Chris Matthews' career from the dead. He just keeps dragging this old asshole back on television and sticking him in front of a camera, because that's what you do when you're in the club. They would do this with Mark Halperin in a minute. If Mark Halperin hadn't really, really publicly or really, really openly been rubbing little Mark Halperin on somebody who didn't want to get rubbed on repeatedly and gotten just busted. Matthews did a lot of stuff like that, but not quite that, and was just an interrupting, obnoxious asshole for years. But he's part of the club. He's in the club, so they keep dragging him back. And I predict, honestly, they will succeed. They're going to get Chris Matthews back, because that's what cable news does. Everything else
it's not doing it to Keith Olbermann, though.
No, of course not. Well, Keith Olbermann's not in the club no more.
Right.
Keith Olbermann keeps saying things like the guy who runs CNN eats paste when he worked at MSNBC, and that nobody sabotages his peers harder and is more of an asshole than Joe Scarborough.
Right.
He is all the varnishes off of Keith Olbermann now that he's free and has a lot of money and doesn't worry about this sort of thing. But cable news will succeed because if anything, if our observations of cable news for the last 20 years has proven anything, is cable news is good at really good at one thing, and that's rehabilitating the reputations of media people and politicians who deserve to be on the scrap heap of history, who've earned their place in obscurity. Matthew Dowd has more than once earned a one-way ticket to Palookaville, but they keep fucking dragging him back and polishing him up and putting him on TV and forgetting what he said, and then half the audience goes, this is some new guy who just showed up, and I love the way he talks, because Nicole Wallace works for MSNBC. And they were pals during the Bush administration, and she just keeps grabbing her old pals and putting them on camera and shining them up and wiping the shit off their shoulders and presenting them as brand new people. And that's what cable news does.
Cable news does something else, though, Driftglass, especially right before the midterms. Shouting poll numbers at you.
Yes, they do.
Tell us some of the research you did.
Yeah, bloggers are lazy. Let's face it. We bloggers, we're lazy people. We get up at the crack of noon. We have a couple of drinks. We write 5 words. We go back to sleep. No. And then we roll around in a pile of money all day.
You were up all night practically doing podcast notes in Photoshop.
I was. And my secret shame is I enjoy doing it. You know, I found one of the things I'm good at, I'm now doing a lot, and that makes me happy. It also makes me pissed because the long history of that shows lessons that I would rather have not learned about my country, but there they are. But as we roll up at the 2022 midterm election point, when we start yelling and jumping up and down, remember that this is the period during which every election cycle, when cable news devolves into people shouting poll numbers at you, polls that have 1,000 crosstabs and are some tangle of issues and a lot of murky nonsense about what the American people want or don't want, et cetera, et cetera. All over cable news. It's about the voters and the American people, and one poll shows this, another shows that, and what people care about. Ignore all of that. Ignore the polls and just vote. And do what you can to support Democratic candidates. And the one thing that really jumps out above the whole welter of nonsense that I just refuse to pay any attention to is how many people during this time of year especially start talking about the American people. The American people won't stand for this. The American people want this. The American people don't want that. Joe Walsh, who now has a career at CNN, again, as someone who should have been cast out into obscurity, but now he's a regular on CNN, has a bug up his ass about the American people. And the American people will not allow this, or will allow this, or they don't believe in this, or they don't believe in that. And fuck you, Joe. There's no such thing as the American people. There's no such group. Other than geographically, there is no such group as the American people. There are Republicans who do not believe in democracy and will vote to get rid of democracy. There are Democrats who, by and large, do believe in democracy and will vote terrified that it's about to be taken away from them because they see what the Republicans already done. And then there's millions of people who are just fucking cowards or lazy or dumb in the middle who can't tell the difference between the two. And those people are also the American people. None of these three groups has anything in common with each other except maybe they love their mothers or they like barbecue or they live in the same country. That's it. So when you hear someone talking about what voters want or what the American people will tolerate, you are being lied to. You're being fed stupid nonsense pundit buzzwords in lieu of actual discussion of what each group does and does not do and does not believe in and will not tolerate. Because that discussion is very uncomfortable for the people around the table, because they have to start talking about how the Republican Party is a fascist party. And everyone on the GOP by this point, since all the other people have been centrifuged out, are fascists who hate this country. Never underestimate how deeply they hate this country. They hate everything about this country. They hate the multiculturalism of it. They hate the plurality of it. They hate trans people. They hate gay people. They hate liberals. They hate Jews. They hate minorities. They hate everyone who isn't them. And that's what binds them together. And talking about them in the same sentence with Democrats is insane. It doesn't make any sense. But all across cable news, the American people love democracy. Will the American people vote for democracy? Well, I don't know. I know tens of millions of them who will, and tens of millions of them who won't, and who will explicitly vote to get rid of it. So don't bother paying any attention to the people on cable news. They're lying to you. And in the spirit of the season, we have gone down to the catacombs and dug up a few issues that were dominating the news back in October of 2012 that we talked about on this very same podcast.
We were podcasting 10 years ago.
Yes,
That's
we were.
right.
Yes, we were. Before that, even.
Yeah.
We've been podcasting since the 50s, Blue Gal.
No, since 2010.
Since 2010. And we dug up a few factoids that might interest you. Some of them parallel our time. Some of them are laughably out of date. But let's rock and roll, Blue Gal.
All right. One of them was a presidential debate between Mitt Romney and Barack Obama. And it showed us that Mitt Romney had very publicly joined the tribe that rubs shit in its hair.
Mm-hmm.
And that also we learned that Barack Obama did not have Benny Gesserit weirding powers like in Dune, where he could just wave his brain and make the fever go away in the Republican Party. He couldn't do that.
Why won't Obama lead? Why won't he lead? Why? Why isn't he changing all their minds with his glorious intellect? Because there are a bunch of people who rub shit in their hair. And Mitt Romney isn't one by nature, but he joined it by choice because he figured out that his party is a bunch of racist know-nothings and he has to pretend to be one if he wants to goddamn win. Now, this is something that has changed over 12 years, over 10 years, which kind of cracked me up. A commentator at The Atlantic magazine noted that any opportunity to ignore Jennifer Rubin that you pass up is an opportunity to ignore Jennifer Rubin lost forever. Because Jennifer Rubin was a big Mitt Romney booster. Jennifer Rubin was
she loved Mitt Romney.
She hated Barack Obama. Barack Obama was the root of all evil, a devil incarnate, and Mitt Romney was, God on earth. And 10 years later, she has noticed the fact that her party, I believe it's now her former party, really wasn't that great and has gotten a whole lot worse during the last 10 years. And now she's, I don't believe any of these people will change forever. I believe given the opportunity, they'll snap right back. But for the moment, Jennifer Rubin writes pretty scalding comments and columns about her former party. Good for her.
She does. Also, Ann Coulter, I'm loath to mention her name because there was a debate in 2012 about whether to write posts about her or not. She was the Tucker Carlson Newsmax hybrid of those days.
Yeah.
And lots of bloggers were suggesting the best way to combat her was to ignore her and not write about her on our blogs.
Right.
And you have in our notes, remember blogs? Remember those?
Remember blogs? Anybody remember blogs?
As a blog.
I do.
But we pointed out that ignoring Ann Coulter on our blogs did not keep her off the Sunday shows when there was a book to push.
No. And
so, people could be different about that. But she was one of the first people I blocked on Twitter.
Yeah. Oh, she was horrible. Horrible. But she was a harbinger of that which was to come. This was the direction they were headed.
Right.
And she was aided and abetted by Bill Maher, who kept propping her career up, and she kept showing up. She had a regular gig at MSNBC in the early days. She was
her books were promoted on MSNBC on a regular basis. Yeah.
She was one of the blondes you would call up when you need a conservative to talk to on a panel. And the direction she was heading in was where everyone else went as well. And we told you. Over the years, we have gotten a lot of opinions and some good-natured scolding about how things we say or write might lead to dire consequences. For example, I got a long and very thoughtful and well-intentioned note from a fellow blogger and a friend of mine saying that while I might be right in every particular about the Lincoln Project, about all their scandals and the lies and the corrupt self-dealing and the lack of any measurable impact on elections and basically the whole ripping off liberals for money and giving nothing in return but porn, that I still should consider that even the slightest breeze, one way or the other, might have some effect on close races. So even if the Lincoln Project's impact is immeasurably small, it might still be real, and it might make some difference, even if that difference is nearly imperceptible. And you know what? He might be right. I won't dispute that. I can't prove that it's not true or true, but just giving my opinion, as I do on this podcast all the time. But while I am personally flattered by the implication that we on this podcast can jog the elbow of the Lincoln lads enough to change the course of history, I think my friend is wildly overestimating the kind of influence that we have. But you know who really is out there stomping on the Lincoln Project?
Steve Schmidt.
Who maybe he should direct his comments to? The Showtime streaming service, which we don't have. You know who else? Yes, former Lincoln Project co-founder Steve Schmidt. Now, Here's some fun statistics. Showtime has 5 million regular viewers per week. I have been blogging for over 17 years, and a typical post of mine is read by maybe 200 to 300 people, tops, for which I am immensely grateful. I mean, it could be zero, and my readers are awesome, and they support me immeasurably, so I'm not bitching about that. I'm just saying compare and contrast the two influencers. Steve Schmidt has hundreds of friends and contacts and cronies in the media. He is a blue check on Twitter and has 1.6 million followers. I am a 4-time Twitter jail recidivist who was banned for life from Twitter for nearly a year, and it was reversed on like the 6th appeal. And I have around 11,000 followers. So really, really don't worry yourself about me coughing during some critical Lincoln Project putt and messing up the election. Because my influence does not extend nearly that far. But if you do have critiques of that, if you do think Lincoln Project should be, dial back the criticism, boys, because maybe they're helpful, direct it at Steve Schmidt. Don't talk to me. Talk to Showtime. However, I will say this about Showtime and Lincoln Project and conservatives and me and you and the rest of us. What really does roast my chestnuts is thinking about the fact that a conservative billionaire like Illinois' own Richard Uihlein is willing to spend nearly $60 million on a doomed campaign to get a crackpot like Darren Bailey elected to the governorship of Illinois. That Uihlein is only one of a whole army of wealthy, conservative, crackpot donors who are willing to spend billions and billions of dollars to create media companies and super PACs and foundations and on and on and on and on, all focused on getting the very worst people in the world elected to offices of authority and power, where they can screw up elections, they can take away your health care, they can take away your rights. And yet, wealthy liberals will not spend even a fraction of that kind of money to build the basic tools and institutions that we need to effectively fight back against that rising tide of billions of dollars of fascism. And that really does piss me off. Anyway.
Going back again 10 years.
Yeah.
October of 2012, Carol Costello was working for CNN, and she stopped an interview with gay hater Brian Fisher of the American Family Association. She said, "I'm going to end this interview because that's just not true."
Wow.
And it was enough for us to stop the podcast and note it.
Wait a minute. Somebody just said someone was lying on CNN and stopped interviewing them?
Stopped them interview and cut them off. Yep.
In October of 2012, 3 weeks before the election, we collectively loved the fact that Rachel Maddow was feisty enough to call out PolitiFact by name for perpetuating the both sides do it lie. But we hated it that the 3 biggest carriers of that disease were, in no particular order, David Gregory of NBC, Tom Brokaw of NBC, and Mark Halperin of NBC.
And in October of 2012, this is what Steve Bannon was writing at the Maddow blog. Quote, "Putting aside all other considerations, it's just not healthy for a political system when one side of the political divide decides to substitute one version of reality for another. Words, facts, arithmetic, and objective truths must maintain some sort of meaning, or our basic ability to have a political conversation will deteriorate into chaos." End quote. So never let anyone tell you that no one could have foreseen what the Republican Party has become.
No. Lots of people foresaw it.
Yeah.
The people who control the cameras didn't want to hear about it.
Right. So let's do a news roundup, Driftglass. Much love and hugs to Andy in England, our English representative listener there. In the lettuce versus trust contest, the lettuce has won. All hail the lettuce. 44 days in office. British Prime Minister Liz Truss has resigned. For you doing the math at home, that's 4.1 Scaramucci's. The massive Brexit-related problems that Britain is facing are the fault of the entire Tory party. But the inept Truss was the one left holding the bag, and she did not hold it well. The lettuce here is in reference to a Daily Star YouTube channel that began live streaming ahead of lettuce on October 14th and asking the question, can Liz Truss outlast the 10-day shelf life of this lettuce?
Yeah.
The answer is no. The deepest cut of all comes from the New York Times pitch bot, which notes Liz Truss to join Harvard's Institute of Politics.
Bravo.
We love that one. We
Doug
really
Balloon,
did.
Bravo.
Love that one. Tory Minister of State for Health, Robert Jenrick, has made the shocking admission that if the Conservative Party gets the next leader wrong, the party may cease to exist. File that under "Don't threaten us with a good time." We want to let all our British friends and listeners know that while the Liz versus lettuce stunt was funny, we know that your real life situation is not. Brexit and the Tory party policies have inflicted enormous and unnecessary suffering on your country. And we hope that each of our countries can find a way to pry our respective conservative lunatics out of power and begin to fix all that they've broken.
Absolutely. Speaking of incompetence, Andrea Mitchell, who continues to be inexplicably employed by MSNBC as a doddering, bewildered train wreck who can no longer make it through an entire sentence without getting hopelessly lost. Her interview, which you can find online everywhere with Nancy Pelosi, was virtually unwatchable.
Yeah, I mean, Nancy Pelosi held her head high and can hold her head high over that interview. You know, Andrea Mitchell hand-wringing over, and really the entire media superstructure, hand-wringing over Nancy Pelosi saying, "I want to punch Donald Trump in the face."
Right.
While his minions are attacking the Capitol and breaking windows and shitting on the floor.
Yeah.
And she said, you said you were going to punch Donald Trump. She said, no, I didn't. I said, I was going to punch Donald Trump. I was going to go to jail and I was going to be happy about it.
Well, and
she took it and doubled down.
And she, asked about, well, why didn't you, make abortion the law of the land when you, well, can you find me 10 Republican senators who would vote for it?
Yeah.
Andrea Mitchell, let's not forget, is Mrs. Alan Greenspan.
Yeah.
And she has been leaning right her whole life. And really, she is just another fucking both sides do it, except her ability to sort of follow the thread and not literally fall asleep on the set.
Literally.
She left that behind like 5-7 years ago. Why she's still there, I have no idea, other than, doddering.
She's revered. She's revered as the foreign policy genius of NBC News.
Right,
which
tells you where NBC News stands these days.
Now, Joe Biden did pledge to codify Roe v. Wade into law if Democrats retain control of Congress in the November midterm elections. In a speech at the Democratic National Committee, Biden promised that the first bill he sends to Congress next year would be legislation to restore abortion rights under Roe v. Wade, the landmark decision that the Supreme Court overruled in June. And don't forget that Roe v. Wade is the compromise. That is the abortion compromise.
That was the abortion compromise. That was the one that makes everybody equally unhappy and uncomfortable. And we should just say as an aside, not in our notes, that we did watch Joe Biden in Pittsburgh today, and he just kicked all kinds of ass. I mean,
he did.
It was a great speech. He was funny. His mic cut out, and he handled it, adroitly. He addressed people in the audience. He talked about his past. He talked about manufacturing and union jobs and John Fetterman and Pittsburgh. And my predecessor had infrastructure week, and it was a fucking punchline.
Yes,
but we're going to have infrastructure decade, and this bridge behind me is going to be rebuilt by Christmas, and on and on. He was great. He was just great. And he talked about, this is the tricky part, he talked about the dollars and cents, basic issues, jobs, manufacturing, infrastructure, streets, roads, the quality of your life in your hometown that a lot of people just care a whole lot more about than they do about democracy. I wish it weren't true, but
frankly,
that is true.
Yes.
But that does not mean he will not also, and Democrats do not also pivot to talk about the larger issues to those of us who actually care about Roe versus Wade and trans people being bashed and all of the CRT bullshit going on, voting rights being overturned, democracy being threatened. So I know he has to do it all, but today he did a very good job of talking directly to people like a human being in a way that I thought was wonderful.
It was a kitchen table speech. It absolutely was. Yeah.
And speaking of kitchen tables, the Biden administration launched the online application for student loan forgiveness. The plan is expected to provide debt relief for as many as 45 million borrowers. Quote, "This is a game changer for millions of Americans," Biden said, and it really is. It's one of those things, man, one of those simple, kind of clear things that you can point to and say, we did that for those people because they needed help and we gave it to them. And that's why I vote for goddamn Democrats.
Vote for goddamn Democrats. And I love hearing Joe Biden say desktop or mobile.
Right. Just say desktop or mobile.
You can apply on desktop or mobile.
Oh,
and
excellent.
It's in English and Spanish. And it takes 5 minutes. It takes 5 minutes to apply for debt relief. And if we have questions or you have questions, we can contact you because we know how to use technology. And by the way, we learned a really important lesson from the Obamacare launch.
Yes, we did. We sure did.
Keep it simple so that you can use databases that the government already has.
Right.
And then for those people who have fallen through the cracks where we can't match you up with your loan, we'll email you and ask you for your loan number if we need it. That's
absolutely.
Filter that out. Filter the people out that you can already just, oh yeah, here you are, I see you. Filter those out first and then deal with the people whose situations are more complicated.
Well, and an equally important lesson that we learned from the Affordable Care Act is before Affordable Care Act, sell. After the Affordable Care Act, sell.
Right,
Don't say we did it, here it is, and let the other people define it as murdering your white grandma.
Right.
No, get out there. You have to sell this stuff. You got to tell people what you did for them, or they don't believe it, or they think it's just, a weather system that moved in.
And if you see people on Facebook, if you're still on Facebook, or if you see people on Twitter talking about their student loans and how, oh, this is great, I have $20,000 knocked off my student loans, reply to them and say, now go to vote.org.
Right.
And not as a thank you. Don't say you have to vote for Democrats now to thank them for the money. Say, vote for people who voted for you.
That's right.
Vote for people who supported you in getting this done. It's very simple because only one party did it. If Republicans had behaved in a more bipartisan manner, we wouldn't be able to politicize this.
Right. And remind them that vote.org is available both on laptop and mobile. So
it's on desktop or mobile.
Desktop or mobile, whichever you prefer.
And you can find out your polling place at vote.org.
Now, who could be against student loan forgiveness, Blue Gal?
I know. Right-wing Wisconsin taxpayers asked the Supreme Court to block the student loan forgiveness plan. The request was filed to Justice Amy Coney Barrett, who is likely to refer the matter to the full court. Really?
Yeah.
The Biden administration has been sued by Republican attorneys general from 7 states and 2 right-wing organizations over the plan. And there was one commenter, I think it was Sam Stein, who said, yeah, go ahead, SCOTUS. Tell taxpayers that they can sue the government over how their taxes are spent.
Great.
Because I know some anti-war people who are going to hire lawyers tomorrow.
Where's my peace dividend? That's what I want to know. Where's my goddamn peace dividend?
It's not going to go anywhere. But it's important to recognize, guess which party is doing this?
Right.
And vote them out quickly. Vote out Republicans. You have a chance to do it next month. Vote them out so that they can't take it away from you.
And it's so easy. You don't have to travel a million miles. You can vote in your town. You go out. You can vote early. You can vote by mail. There's lots of ways to vote. It's so simple. Just vote these sons of bitches out and see what happens. Speaking of the other party, the Biden Interior Department announced the first ever lease sale for offshore wind development in the Pacific Ocean. Yay!
The Trump organization charged the Secret Service more than 5 times the recommended government rate for hotel stays at Trump properties while protecting the Trump family, according to the House Oversight Committee. The committee found that Trump's company charged the Secret Service exorbitant and excessive nightly rates on dozens of trips, as high as $1,185 per night, despite claims by Alec, Trump, and the Trump organization that federal employees traveling with the Trumps would stay at the properties for free or at cost.
Oh, man, they lied. Trump lied. The Justice Department recommends that Steve Bannon be sentenced to 6 months in jail and a $200,000 fine after he defied a subpoena to testify before the January 6th committee.
The new Both Sides Do It media garbage site called Semaphore that I just want to kill in the cradle, Driftglass.
I know.
It has arrived to school us heathens on the fact that there are both sides to every story. Literally, they use the example of a political candidate being caught stealing candy from a baby.
Mm-hmm.
And then they said, if a reporter says that is going to hurt that person's campaign, hey, that's just your opinion.
That's just your opinion, man. That's just your opinion. And back in 2004, when I was a commenter at the news blog, at the late lamented news blog run by the late Steve Gilliard, I made a joke in the comments section that I then resurrected and put on my blog that said, if Dick Cheney were caught on videotape on the White House lawn throwing burning kittens at homeless veterans, what would be the first 3 words out of Cokie Roberts' mouth? It would be, but the Democrats.
That's right.
This site is that joke come to life.
Mm-hmm.
And it needs to go back into my nightmares where it belongs.
Well, it has 5 investors who've tossed in $5 million each. Yep. So they have $25 million to spend, Driftglass. Yep.
Uh-huh.
You and I have never had $25 million to spend.
No.
In our lifetime.
Not. No. But
they've got a hedge fund person from Hong Kong.
Sure.
They've got another hedge fund person who worked with Heinz Corporation at one point.
Yeah.
And they've got, I think, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some no labels people on the board. I'm not sure, but
we'll find out. We'll let you know. But this, again, there seems to be an infinite amount of money for bullshit both sides do it sites and bullshit Richard Uihlein style dumping billions of dollars into the right-wing coffers and wealthy liberals. I know there are wealthy liberals out there. I know there are because I saw them writing
spare $5 million.
Yeah, well, I saw them writing big checks to the Lincoln Project.
Yeah.
Won't spend a fraction of that to develop the basic media infrastructure necessary to push back against this nonsense. They complain about it. They bitch about it. I see them on Twitter all the time going, Democrats need to blah, blah, blah. But you know what? We can't do that without a very big megaphone and lots of voices all sort of singing in harmony. And that costs money, which is something that I don't think liberals who have a lot of money believe we should ask for. They're like, live on a beanbag chair, eat cheese sandwiches, starve for the cause because the cause is just. That is not how the fucking world works. I wish it were, because if it were, we'd have 100 senators who look like John Fetterman in the Senate. But that is not how things work. And it's weird to me that people who made their fortune, especially in the entertainment industry, in the movie industry, who know how to make things and know what messaging is about, who know how to build media companies, movie companies, can't get it through their fucking heads that this is how politics must be done now if you want to win. Greg Abbott of Texas said he would not raise the legal age for purchasing an assault rifle to 21 because it would, quote, wouldn't address the real problem, quote, which he stated was mental health. In April, that same Greg Abbott slashed $211 million from the Texas department that oversees mental health programs.
He also said that the problem isn't guns, it's doors on the schools.
Yeah.
And he's willing to start a program to send, I'm going to throw up talking about this, send parents their children's DNA records so that their children can be identified after a school shooting.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy is a monster.
He's a monster. And Texas voters, enough of Texas voters love him to keep putting him back in office. Yeah. And hopefully this is the last time.
I hope this is the last time.
Yep.
Because we don't have to live like this.
No.
But we have to vote.
This is all man-made. This is all done by people to people.
Republican Elise Stefanik, whose people keep trying to call us. I don't know why. They've got a real bad list. Just took credit. She took credit for the new $12.9 million in funding for rural hospitals that was awarded to her district of New York. She called it a significant investment. However, this funding came from Biden's American Rescue Plan, which Stefanik voted against. Yeah. It is stolen valor all the time.
Yeah. And I think on some level, all of these politicians, Greg Abbott and Stefanik and all the rest of them, understand that their voters are too brainwashed or too stupid or too racist to care.
Yeah.
That it doesn't matter that I voted against a thing that I'm now taking credit for. My voters are morons. They'll never notice. They'll vote for me because I have an R after my name.
Well, that's why I said earlier this show, it infuriates me to see how much they hate their own voters. They're willing to just lie and gaslight them to their face. Yeah. And
their voters are willing to take it. So in It Takes Money to Make Money news from Bloomberg, Trump spent 91 cents to raise each dollar as his troubles mount. Filing shows that Donald Trump spent $22 million to raise $24 million, most of which were spent on SMS, digital ads, and lists that ate up most of the third quarter haul.
Poor baby.
Poor baby.
From Politico, Trump signed a court document that knowingly included false voter fraud stats. This is not a small matter. This is, as George Conway said on CNN last night, this is a smoking gun for Georgia.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
The timeline is that Donald Trump had emails from John Eastman saying these numbers are wrong.
Yes.
And 3 days later, he's on the phone with Georgia election officials asking for a specific number of votes to be found.
Yes, he was.
U.S. District Court Judge David Carter wrote in an 18-page opinion that emails from attorney John Eastman, an architect of Trump's last-ditch effort to subvert the 2020 election, needed to be turned over to the January 6th Select Committee. These specific emails, and Carter went through something like 500 emails and was very careful to protect Donald Trump's rights to attorney-client privilege. There is an exception to that if it involves committing a crime. If you're involved in committing a crime with your attorney present or cooperating with you, there's an exception to attorney-client privilege. Mm-hmm. But the judge didn't do this in some sort of blanket way. He used little tiny tweezers to pull out specific emails that are subject to this crime exemption.
Crime crime exemption.
Crime exemption. Mm-hmm. And the judge really did a very careful job about this and was very interested in protecting Donald Trump's rights. That sounds awful, but it's necessary.
That's how justice is supposed to work.
That's how justice is done. I want Donald Trump to have a fair trial when he goes to prison.
Yeah, I do too.
So these emails, Carter wrote, quote, show that President Trump knew that the specific numbers of voter fraud were wrong, but continued to tout those numbers both in court and to the public. This is called defrauding the United States of America.
Uh-huh. And it's a crime.
It's a crime.
Actual crime. And it's a really blatant one, too.
Yep.
We would like to thank alert reader Angus Millen on social media for pointing out that on The View this week, which I don't watch, I don't believe I ever have, Whoopi Goldberg said, quote, the thing that gets me mad is when people say Democrats should get the message out. It's the media who won't report the real story. Whoopi's right.
Thank you, Whoopi.
Thank you, Whoopi.
And Maricopa County officials say it's too late to remove GOP candidate Randy Kaufman from the ballot in a race for college district board now that he has been arrested for masturbating in a truck near a preschool, allegedly.
Let's throw in allegedly because we don't... He hasn't been convicted yet, but yeah, because...
You're going to need a fair trial there, Randy.
Yeah, you're going to need a real good lawyer,
Throw yourself on the mercy of the court, Randy.
At least I didn't storm the Capitol. This week in local news, J.B. Pritzker mopped the floor with Darren Bailey in the gubernatorial debate for Illinois governor. And despite the fact that the right-wing billionaire Richard Uihlein has pumped $54 million into Bailey's campaign, apparently Bailey can only afford to hire idiots on his comm staff. So his comm staff, imagine Sean Spicer, only less competent.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
They're real bad at this.
Speaking of Darren Bailey, this week his campaign got its biggest single infusion of cash so far, $2 million more from mega donor Richard Uihlein. Uihlein's $2 million donation Tuesday, the same day that Bailey and incumbent Democrat Governor J.B. Pritzker had their second and final televised debate. With Tuesday's donation, Uihlein has given, again, $54 million to back Bailey, most of it as the chief funding source for a political action committee allied with the state senator and wealthy farmer from Xenia, Illinois. The political action campaign is called The People Who Play by the Rules and is run by a right-wing radio talk show host, Dan Proft of Naples, Florida. Uihlein gave the Political Action Committee $20 million in July and $13.9 million on October 5th. And then the Political Action Committee aired $12.5 million worth of ads from July through September and has since spent another $5 million on campaign commercials aimed at helping Bailey get elected, which he's not going to.
No. So I don't feel bad asking people for $5 to support this podcast.
You don't, huh?
I really don't.
I think J.B. Pritzker's very funny line. during this last debate, they asked him, are you upset that Joe Biden isn't here campaigning for you? And he said, I'd love to have Joe Biden campaigning for me, but I think he should go to states that need him.
Ow! Ow!
He should be campaigning with candidates who need him right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll do more Darren Bailey updates because he ain't going to be around that much longer.
Fail.
But
yeah,
that's the news roundup for this week.
Each week we post to our Facebook page and website an internet kitty sent in by you, the listeners. Oh my gosh, this little kitten this week.
Yeah.
His name is Red Rambo. So named because this little 3-ounce orange kitten drew first blood with his little wee paws and his little wee claws. First blood.
Not me. They first drew blood. Anyway.
Of course, Red Rambo, who is smaller than a micro keyboard, but with a heart that holds terabytes, eats freshly poured cat food, our fake sponsor. Yay. Whether you serve pet store perfection or dollar store dreck, your cats will sit on the kitchen floor and demand that the food they eat is only freshly poured. Freshly poured, freshly poured. Oh, my Lord, it's freshly poured. And you can visit this little kitten, who is mighty indeed, Red Rambo, at our Facebook page or website. And you can send your internet kitty, dog, or other pet to us at our email address, proleftpodcast@gmail.com, where you can also write to both of us. Feel free to write us. We love hearing from you. Be aware that if you write to us at any of our addresses, we reserve the right to read your email or U.S. Postal Service. Go, Postal Unions! Letter on the air unless you say otherwise. #FireDeJoy. Don't forget our gourmet coffee guideline. If you can afford to buy an espresso-based beverage for yourself, buy one for us. This is not charity. This is our job, and we love doing this podcast. Approximately 1% of our listeners support this podcast with a contribution, and you can too. See our website, proleftpod.com, for details. We have Patreon, and we are looking for approximately another 125 Patreon donors to join us so that we can go bi-weekly. We want to do 2 podcasts a week starting in January.
Yep.
And we need to raise money to do that. So please join us at Patreon and help us out with that. And all of that information, including our Patreon button, is there at proleftpod.com. Please share our show on social media. And if you love this particular episode, send us $5 and let us know.
And tell Keith Olbermann to listen to us.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Tell Keith Olbermann to listen to us.
Yeah,
right.
He really should, because he's new to this game, and we can give him some pointers about podcasting.
Thank you so much for listening and supporting us. We do appreciate you so much. Hey, Driftglass, how are the internet kitties doing this week?
Well, Blue Gal, now that the temperatures have dipped below freezing a couple of times, the internet kitties have once again gotten awfully smug about their luxurious fur coats.
Thank you, Driftglass.
My pleasure, Blue Gal. I love you.
Love you too.
Let's think about living. Think about living. Let's think about loving. Think about loving. Let's think about the hooping and the hopping and the popping and the loving, lovey-dovey. Let's forget about the wine and the crying, the shooting and the dying and the fellow and the switchblade knife. Let's think about living. Let's think about life.
The Professional Left Podcast is recorded under a Creative Commons license. Copyright 2022. DGBG Productions Incorporated.